The most dangerous day of your life was the day you were born, not for you, for your mother. Today, a woman gives birth in a clean hospital room, a machine watching the baby's heartbeat, and a surgeon minutes away. And she walks out days later with her baby, both of them fine. That safety is brand new. For thousands of years, giving birth meant walking up to the edge of death and hoping to come back. And what women actually did to survive it is stranger and braver than you think. Here's the assumption. Ancient women squatted in a field, popped the baby out, and got straight back to work. It's a myth. Birth was never simple, and our ancestors knew it could kill, so they built things around it. Tools, rituals, specialists, thousands of years ago. And one of the oldest tools was a brick. In ancient Egypt, women did not lie down to give birth. They squatted. They stood on 2 mud bricks, 1 foot on each, with a gap beneath to catch the baby, and these were called birth bricks. For a long time, we only knew about them from paintings. Then, in 2001, an archaeologist named Joseph Fegner dug a real one up at a site called Abydos, about 3,700 years old, painted with a mother holding her newborn and ringed by protective gods. A real object from a real birth from before Moses was even a story. Birth was so important it had its own goddess. Her name was Meskenet, the spirit of the birthing bricks themselves, and birth had specialists. Every birth was attended by other women, midwives who had done it before and knew what to do when it went wrong. This was not guesswork. By ancient Rome, a physician called Soranus wrote a whole manual on it nearly 2,000 years ago. He explained how to turn a baby lying the wrong way, how a midwife should trim her nails so she did not cut the mother, how to care for her afterwards. Some of his advice was better than what women got 1,000 years later, far better, but nothing hid the danger. Before modern medicine, roughly 1 birth in every 100 killed the mother. Sit with that. A woman might give birth 8 or 9 times in her life, so do the maths, and a terrifying share of women died doing it. Childbirth killed more women than any plague, more than any war. And the men were kept well away because birth was a female world, sealed off in a room full of women while the father waited outside. Useless, listening. Then there was the birth itself, and all the ways it could go wrong. Feet first, shoulder first, simply too big. Often there was nothing anyone could do. And a cesarean was not a rescue because for almost all of history, cutting a baby out of a living woman killed her. It was done only when the mother was already dead or dying in a last attempt to save the child. A mother surviving the operation was astonishingly modern, so women reached for anything that might help. They drank strange herb brews to hurry it along, they hung charms over the bed, and they prayed to every god and saint they knew. Some slid an open pair of scissors under the mattress, believing the sharp edge would cut the pain. None of it worked, but it gave a frightened woman something to hold, in a moment where there was almost nothing else. And the danger did not end when the baby came. One of the deadliest parts came after. It was called childbed fever, and for centuries it swept through the rooms where women gave birth, killing mothers days later in agony. Nobody knew why. Then, in 1847, a doctor in Vienna named Ignaz Semmelweis worked it out. The doctors themselves were the killers. They were going straight from cutting up dead bodies to delivering babies without ever washing their hands, carrying death from the corpse to the mother. Semmelweis told them to wash, and the deaths collapsed, and the medical world mocked him, ignored him, and let him die, forgotten, in an asylum. He was right. It just took them decades to admit it, and the babies had worse odds than the mothers. For most of history, about 1/4 of all babies died before their first birthday, and nearly half never reached adulthood. This is why, in many cultures, parents did not name a child for days, sometimes weeks. Naming a baby you might lose was simply too painful. That was not a colder people than us. It was people bracing against a grief we can barely imagine. Even a healthy birth came with strange rituals afterwards. In much of Europe, a new mother went into what was called lying in, shut in a warm, darkened room for weeks, allowed to do nothing but rest and feed the baby, cut off from the outside world. And when she finally emerged, she often could not simply go back to normal. She had to be blessed in a church ceremony called churching, a ritual cleansing, before she counted as fit to rejoin everyone else. Birth left a woman marked, and society had rules for scrubbing the mark off. The baby had its own customs. The afterbirth, the placenta, was rarely just thrown away. All over the world, it was treated as powerful, even sacred, buried in a special spot or under a tree planted for the child, or kept to ward off harm. And the baby itself was often bound tight, wrapped head to foot, so it could barely move for months. We wince at that. To them, it was simply how you kept a fragile new life safe. Now here is the part that should genuinely surprise you. For almost all of human history, women did not give birth lying on their backs. They gave birth upright, squatting, kneeling, or sitting on a special stool with a hole cut in the seat. And it made sense because upright, gravity does half the work and the body opens wider. It is very probably the better way. So why do we lie down now? Blame a king. The story goes back to the French court and to Louis XIV, who liked to watch his mistresses give birth from behind a curtain. And you cannot watch a woman on a birthing stool. So she was laid flat on her back for his convenience, and the fashion spread from the palace to the doctors. Much of the world has done it the hard way ever since. One bored king may have changed the way we are all born. There is one more twist, and it is a dark one. For over 100 years, a single family held the secret to saving babies stuck in the birth canal, the Chamberlains. They had invented the forceps, a pair of curved tongs that could gently pull a trapped baby free, and it could have saved thousands of lives. Instead, they kept it a trade secret. They carried it into the room in a locked wooden box and blindfolded the mother so she could not see it. They kept the miracle to themselves, for money, for generations, while other women's babies died for want of the very tool hidden in that box. And here's where the whole story turns, because it says something about what we are. A wild animal gives birth alone and in silence. Almost every human society did the opposite. We gave birth surrounded by other people, women who held your hand, who had survived it themselves, who knew exactly what to do. We are one of the only creatures on Earth that treats birth not as a private accident, but as something you should never have to face alone. There were customs for the men too, and one of the strangest has never fully died out. In many cultures, the father did not just wait outside the door. He took to his own bed and groaned and acted out the agony of labor himself, while the mother did the actual work a few feet away. It is called couvade, and anthropologists have found it all over the world. Maybe it was meant to confuse the evil spirits and lure them off the real mother and child. Maybe it was just a man desperate to feel part of something he had been shut out of. Either way, a grown man moaning in bed beside an exhausted new mother is one of history's quiet absurdities. And the women in that room had a name. They were called the gossips. Today that word means idle chatter, something small and a little mean. But it began as something close to sacred. A gossip was a god sibling, one of the trusted women called to a birth, to hold the mother and to share the knowledge passed from woman to woman for 100 generations. The birthing room was theirs, and what was said in it stayed in it. We only use that word for women talking in private because, for most of history, the birthing room was the one place on Earth where a woman's words were entirely her own. And once the baby arrived, another woman often took over. For thousands of years, the rich did not feed their own children. They handed the baby to a wet nurse, another woman, usually poor, who breastfed it in their place, sometimes for years. It let a wealthy mother recover and have more children faster. It also meant countless babies were raised on the milk and in the arms of a woman who was not their mother at all. Whole bonds of love grew up in that gap, invisible and almost never written down. So the next time you hear a newborn cry in a hospital corridor, and a nurse says mother and baby are both doing fine, understand how new those words really are. For almost every woman who has ever lived, giving birth was the bravest thing she would ever do. She did it on 2 bricks or a wooden stool with a knife under the bed and other women around her. She did it knowing it might be the last thing she ever did. And you're here, reading this, because across 100,000 years, over and over again, they were brave enough to do it anyway.